We've seen a big rise in MVP agencies where they basically take an idea or concept you have all the way to a working prototype or an MVP that you can see and it's working and it's nice. That's usually 80% of any AR project where it's proving to you that this thing works. It's not production ready yet. I know many claim that we do code rabbit, we use these security things and so on, but usually you can vibe code your way all the way to 80%. And the last 20% is a complete nightmare. And I'm going to show you based on real projects that I've worked with. Big businesses don't like something up to 80%. They like to test it internally, yes, but they will not ship it to their client base or even their employees if it's just 80% and it does not have that final 20%. In this video, I want to show you exactly that. Without further ado, let's jump into the screen. So today we're going to talk about the final 20%, which is usually a nightmare for any AI project. How can you go from MVP, prototype, pilot, all the way to production where the masses or all your employees are using it without draining your wallet or breaking the tech? We're going to discuss three main points in this video. Point number one is what does real scaling or production look like, and what are the stages that you go from MVP to pilot all the way to production and used by the masses. Point number two is what not to do and where AI consultants fail. And I'm going to give you real practical case studies and examples of me doing this. And point number three is I'm going to show you the transition. How can you go from an MVP to production? What should you take along the way? What are the elements? And what should you leave behind, which is not needed? And what you should you build upon or encapsulate everything with. If you don't know who I am, my name is Adham Alkhaja. I've launched a couple of satellites into outer space, pursued my PhD in aerospace engineering, and now I integrate AI within businesses. And I want to start with this. Think of production from day one, because this is a weird observation that I've seen with many entities and businesses I talk to. They say that, okay, let's just start with this AI use case with this thing that we have on the side. Let's pilot it and see how it goes. And we don't consider it's going to go live one day to the masses, to the market, to the employees that we have right now. But when it does, we're going to consider that and we're going to look how it can be production level and so on. This is an issue because this mindset is the IT project mindset. We're bringing it to an AI project. And there was this report. I'm just gonna highlight this line over here saying that 95% of the organizations get zero return on their investment with AI projects and they're failing and so on. And this is, by the way, not from big MIT. You can think of it that, okay, I may be doubting the credentials over here, but what I can confirm from my practical experience with businesses is that majority of Gen AI pilots or prototypes are failing. 95%, let's say 80% to 95%. And I made a video on this, you can check it out. But failure by itself is not the problem. I'm going to show you a graph very briefly. Like right now, this is going to make so much sense to you. It's that production was never an option from the beginning. And after they spend 6 months on something, that of course becomes a failure, and it's going to be an expensive one and a very time consuming one. And nobody thought about production level, why they were trying things out. That is the bigger problem. That's the underlying problem that I see over here. And the reality is it's coming from those AI consulting firms, the big ones that charge 6 to 7 figures for this 6 to 12 month AI strategy, AI prototype plan. Let's prove concept. Let's prove the concept over here. Let's prototype this, build an MVP, and so on. This is way too long and way too expensive for this probabilistic technology that we have, which is called artificial intelligence, that the nature of this technology does not go with this approach. This is an IT project approach, and we're taking an AI approach over here. So the mental model I want you to have, which is what not to do, but is done currently massively with AI projects, is that let's build this AI project in this isolated environment. Let's add all these cool features, and then we're going to push it to our company infrastructure, workflow, or whatever it is. And this 99% of the time will not work for an AI project. And I've seen it. And this, I think, is the core reason behind why projects are failing with AI. And essentially, what this means is, and this is what we used to do in this space as well. I'm going to show you what you used to do, but this is what it means that let's build this thing on Earth in a lab, and then let's throw it into space and into an unknown environment that there is solar radiation, solar flare, there's gravity gradients, the shifting gravity, and these all particles happening, and everything is just shifting every single day. That's unexpected. and let's expect this thing just to work over there. And essentially, this is what you're doing with AI projects, which does not make much sense. And I'm going to show you the right way we used to do it, and that is applicable to AI projects as well. So, what to do, but is not done with AI projects, is build this AI project in an integrated environment and start adding features and functionality piece by piece as you are within this environment that's similar. If you can't achieve it exactly, that's very similar, that has the constraints, the conditions, the external disturbances, and everything within that environment to test this AI project. So it usually goes like this. Let's go from idea to concept to MVP to pilot and then to production. Usually, this is where people stop. And I'm going to show you the graph of it. I'm not going to burn the episode on you over here. So essentially, let's explain this process. Here's where you come up with this problem, this hypothesis. This may work for us, or we may need AI in this location or this place or whatever it is. And usually, where I see AI consultants come in is they come to these big entities, governmental entities, or a big organization and say, "Okay, give me your problem. I'm gonna come to you with 4 possible solutions for this problem. You choose from that problem what you like or the solution you like, and then maybe you could test it and start building out that use case and documenting it." And this is where they go from idea to concept. And they go from concept to MVP when they have this nice demo that they build really fast. And then they have this AI model attached to it. They have evaluations looking at all these metrics, and they have feedback, and also they have early tests of what the early users are saying. And then they pilot it across more users, and this is within the environment. It's not within a lab that they're building out and so on, but within the workflow they want to build it in or integrate it within. And I'm going to go into details about all of this in a bit. They add more funding over here, and there's a big funding or a big push of money that goes in through this process, and they test the system. And then finally, the production, which is the support, the DevOps, the production systems, which we're going to go through this in a bit. But this production, essentially, you need to think about this from day one because this is super important and how things will change from, let's say, let's draw a line over here or here. It changes from the discovery phase, which we're going to go into details with, into the delivery phase, which is the production here. And the point and the main goal of all these steps is you want to reduce the risk on you over time because here the risk is high. We have this idea, we don't know it's going to work. And at this point at the pilot, we are confident that it has a high probability of working, but we're not sure it's going to work 100%, of course. That's never the case. There's always that risk, but we have a high probability that it will work. And then this is what it becomes essentially. And I'm going to show you how we did it in space. And I'm going to tap into this into much details in future videos as well. Is essentially we understand the environment we're going into, which is the business, the marketing department, or the department that we are in, or the workflow, or is it a feature within a product where we're adding AI, or what's the use case of AI in this scenario that we're going towards. And then we simulate to either build within. So this is an extreme example because what we used to do in space, we can't just go in space and test things out and come back down and just do things. So we simulate it on Earth with the exact space conditions. As you can see over here, this is a vibration table, essentially giving you the vibration that the spacecraft will feel when it's in the rocket and launching up to space, just to make sure it doesn't break and so on. There's a thermal chamber as well to look at the heat cycles in terms of cold, hot, if it's in front of the sun or behind the sun and so on. So we simulated in this case. And with businesses, it's much easier for AI projects, by the way. You just kind of go into the department and say, can I test it with 5 of your employees and so on? So you simulate and test it as much as you can. And then you start adding features as you are within the environment and not in a separate lab and just throw it within the business itself. So now let's get into the details of all of this. And I wanted to get into details of this cycle that I showed you over here. So essentially, we talked about idea, concept, MVP, pilot, and ship. So it's ship meaning the production ready or the product itself. So the ROI, the green line over here is the ROI line, and the red line over here is the risk line, and the purple line is the favorable kill switch, which is when can I exit this project and when will this project most likely fail if it's gonna fail. So phase number one, as we talked about, from here, from idea all the way to pilot, is the discovery phase, where you do not know it's going to work or not, but you're decreasing the risk over time in order to make it work. And usually, not much investment is put here in terms of your money or cash, but more of the employee's time, maybe, or effort or mental capacity in order to just build out this idea into a concept, into then an MVP. And then MVP is where you see this first big cost dip, and then you maybe see a second big cost dip coming here as you come to the pilot. And then you can start seeing a positive ROI. And this is typically how AI projects work. And on the line, as I mentioned, risk should be increasing. And the highest place, or the highest probability place, for someone to quit and say this just sucks, it does not work, this AI use case, and not let's not spend more money on it. And I think what they meant in the MIT studies over here, but people rushing into over here because it took a lot of time, which is what consultants gave them. But I think they're saying that this curve over here, this hump, it was somewhere over here, and they just quit, and it was a loss. It was a negative ROI for them. So essentially, to repeat this: discovery phase, delivery phase. Discovery is we're discovering if this idea works. Delivery phase just goes here when the risk is low enough, and we've tested this idea out, and we have a high probability that this will work out. And the best place to kill any AI project that you have is at this peak over here, saying that okay, we tested things out, we had this idea, we had this concept, we had this MVP, and it did not work out like we wanted to. And then let's just kill this project and start something new. And the point is, and a very important point, the problem that I see big AI, big companies are doing with the AI projects is they take this process as a 6 month to 12 month thing, and they put a big cash in it where it becomes this heavy cash cow that it's very hard to pivot, and they don't have the flexibility to do anything with. When I say and I suggest that we compress this cycle over here, this testing from idea to concept to MVP to pilot, within 1 to 2 weeks at a low cost, and just capping the budget over there just to know if this is going to work or not, and keep the budget for the delivery phase instead of discovery phase. So the opposite of what AI consultants say, and this is where I'm saying the big figure consultants go wrong, is that they put a lot of effort and they plan this for 6 months up to the MVP phase, when it should be really fast iterating because of the probabilistic nature of AI itself. So let me just read these things out for you. Over here, as I mentioned, this is also means that 80 to 95% of MVPs will fail by nature as a result of this graph, because this is the easiest place or the best place to stop it. And most probably, you won't have a working product just because you had an idea. You need to test things out over and over again. And once you find something working, you latch onto that and build it to a pilot and build it to a shipping phase. And the next point over here is that pilots can have a second big cost dip. So sometimes, and this is the reason why I put this a dotted line over here, is sometimes the delivery starts from here because there's a big cost dip, but a lot of times it goes over here, which is after this shipping phase. So this is essentially what it is, but the point is you keep the risk decreasing, and the speed and cost and budget of both of the discovery phase and the delivery phase must be separated. And that's how you have this nice cycle of iterating and checking what works out within your entity and ship that AI project and have a high probability of it being a success. So the main point I'm trying to make here is that each phase is dealt differently, as the objectives, tools, mentality, and the frame, that mindset you have towards this project is different. So let's look at it in much more details over here, because this is super important. I think this is where the segregation of things is where people get it wrong. So let's start with the discovery phase. They only go to the delivery phase, or a project goes into a delivery phase, which is production. And this is just other terms for production, when the risk is low and there's a high probability of this AI use case working because we've proved certain initial metrics. So in the discovery phase, it's all about validating and experimenting. So it's about having fast tests, which is around 1 to 2 weeks, not 1 month tests are going through this process, but 1 to 2 weeks, because you never know. Maybe after 1 week, after you're using this certain LLM AI model and using NA10 or whatever, some other tool comes out and you're just out of business, or you just need to pivot or adapt to that new tool. So 1 to 2 weeks, test fast, and then we can know if we're going to go into delivery or not. Be a scientist over here. You're always experimenting, because there's a high probability that it will not work out. So this is just reality. Whatever you test initially, there's a high probability when you integrate it within your business or within this department, it will not work out based on your assumptions, and you may need to do and try certain other things. And the point number 3 is minimize the scope and constraint and budgets and time and team as much as you can, and have as much as less of restrictions you can have, because the more restrictions you have, the slower you're going to move. The slower you're going to move, this fails to be true, and then you're out of this validation and experimentation zone. And final point over here, it's fine to have informal processes where you do not need to have heavy documentation, let's say for updating a certain code or committing certain changes right now and during this phase. But that comes when you go into the delivery phase. And I like this quote by Jeff Bezos when he mentioned, if you can't feed a team with 2 pizzas, it's too large. I I want to tell you that this is how big the team should be for this phase over here. You should not have a buffet and everyone coming to all the reviews with it, and you find yourself ordering buffet, because it's all about speed and testing. And now let's talk about the delivery phase over here. Delivery phase is about scale and to operate and maintain this system that you built out. So now you have structured planning instead of fast test, where you have this delivery roadmap, you have an overall plan of what we're going to do, what's the budget we're going to put into this, and so on. You're going to have strict accountability, which is who will own the mistakes. If the AI calls Ahmed, for example, Jennifer, who's gonna be responsible for this, and who's gonna own the failures of this, or if something goes wrong, who's going to fix it? Essentially, if you're thinking about engineering methods, it's the FDIR, you're detecting the failures, and then you're isolating the failures and recovering from that failure. And then you define the standards, requirements, and acceptable criteria, and you have formal processes to make changes in the code and committing everything that you want. Maybe you have a committee that you put, or they're going to review everything and so on. And here it's fine to have a buffet, where it's because quality, security, and maintenance are most important when you go into production, but pizzas for the testing team always. And just to explain, and so we be on the same page in terms of scaling, what does scaling really mean? It means that you have more users now, you have more usage, you're spending more tokens, you're spending more money at that point, and this requires you to have more integration and more automation. And you can see very, very clearly, based on everything we talked about so far, is why when people start with agents over here, there's a high failure rate, because this is high integration within your system or your processes, your workflows, or whatever you do within your business, and it's high automation as well, and you can't really pinpoint what goes wrong, because you can't look under the hood exactly with AI agents at this point. And what I recommend, that you start here with assistants, for example, whatever use case you have, start with an assistant. And it's because it's the easiest, it's the fastest. Prove value, prove return on the investment, because this starting here or here is going to slow you down. It's going to get you out of this discovery phase and make you this AI 6 month kind of, let's test things out, and you become irrelevant by the end of the 6 months, to be honest. 1 month is a lot as well. So now let's move on to, how does production and scaling look like for AI solutions? What are the components, and what do we take from MVPs, and what do we keep for the MVPs, and what do we change, and so on? So the components of any AI project right now is the UI UX plus AX. This is new, the agentic or the AI experience that someone goes through, the user interface basically, and the user experience over here. Then we have the workflow, the logic of things working out. Then we have the AI model itself, and then we have the data pipeline, and then we have the infrastructure, which is the hardware, the tech that we need to make this work. These are the main components of either a pilot or an MVP or a production grade kind of AI project. So what we take usually from the MVP after we've built it out, or the pilot, we take the workflow, which is the logic, because of course the logic did not change. We take the AI model, because we've already used one AI model. And I want to make a very, very strong note, because I've seen this happen and come up in meetings a lot of times, saying that, okay, maybe the AI in chat GPT or whatever is not working that much right now, because we're testing it on a certain amount of users. Let's just scale this to the full company. Let's get more employees on board, and maybe we get more data, because AI, machine learning, and all that works with more data, and maybe then it's going to work better. This is essentially telling you that we were not able to make this work, or the engineering team did not make it work at a small scale, so it may work in the big scale, and that's usually most of the time not true. And for the data pipeline, essentially, sometimes you scrape using Appify or all these tools just to test things out during MVP, but then maybe you shift to other things when you go to production level, and so on. So what mainly changes over here? This kind of changes. This does not change. This does not change as you go from MVP to production. This definitely changed, because usually for MVPs you have sloppy UIs, user experiences, and the user experience of the mass, let's say all your employees and so on, is much different than that test group that you had, and you care more about that, and also the AI experience as well. And this is maybe needed, because it depends on the MVP infrastructure you use to build it out, but sometimes it's not needed and sometimes it is needed. So this is essentially what you take from the MVP, and what do you keep for the MVP, and what do you change as well. But the most important part of all of this is you add monitoring and governance. This usually was not there during the MVP, because you did not have a lot of users. You did not know exactly when the peak usage is. You did not have enough evaluation metrics, and you don't know exactly what's going on, but you had limited amount that could prove, okay, this can work. Let's test it out right now. So what you'd add around all these components or the AI project when you go into production is, one, you add monitoring, which is real user insights. when is the peak usage, what are the proper evaluation metrics to make sure that this is a success or not. You add traceability, observability, what's happening exactly within each component, what if something goes wrong, and so on. And also you add governance to see who who to call or who to hold accountable if the AI that you're using insults someone, let's say. Who are you gonna, you're not gonna go and slap the AI, right? So who's gonna be accountable here? And what will we do when we have this mistake that happened? What's the mitigation plan? And how are we going to act fast, and who's going to act fast, and so on. And always, I just want you to make this clear, because usually this is a misconception. Scaling does not mean to make something bigger. Basically means it's you reusing things from the MVP and adding only necessary things in order to make the balance and make it production ready. And we focus on, once we go to the production level, on reliability. Security is very, very important. I almost hear it in every conversation I have with every single business. The security part, the performance. And if you want to start like this is a tip for you, if you're in a meeting and so on, if you want to start with something, you say this is highly secure, they like it, they're going to hear to everything you're going to say afterward. Three is you're going to talk about the performance. Four, you're going to focus on the maintainability, and then the scalability, of course. So now all you need to do is set the roadmap and go. I can go into much details about this. If you're interested, put a comment below. I'm going to go and give you a full deep dive in terms of what the roadmap looks like. But essentially it has 5 levers, which is the people, the process, the data, the tech, and the AI ops. Now, do you see why 80% of these AI companies and agencies just focus on MVPs and pilots? Because they're the easiest. The 80%, they can vibe code their ways all the way to there, not caring about the security. Okay, not caring that much about the security and scalability and what will happen afterwards. But the nightmare is that in the 20% that comes after, and no big company, I can guarantee you this, wants all these security leaks and maintainability problems and scalability problems, that they can't rely on this piece of code base or software and ship it to their audience, their customers, their client base, or even their employees. That being said, engineering is very, very, very important at this stage to make anything production ready. And I see it, and this is my opinion, I see it as the only way to moving forward if you want to make anything production ready that's solid and you can ship to the marketplace.